Hello and welcome to episode 10 of the North South podcast with myself, Andrew Hardwick, and my co host,
Dave Allenson.
Lovely. Um, Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the perfect performance. So, obviously, we're a bit late to the party, as we always are, because we're not podcasters. We have proper jobs and real shit going on.
I
Um,
mean, let's proper
Relatively,
jobs.
relatively, yeah. Relatively speaking, we like to think we've got shit going on, but the reality is we don't do very much. But Dave does have a family and shit, so that sort of counts. But we're going to talk about the perfect performance relative to like CJI. So obviously CJI was a big event a couple of months ago. I don't even know how long ago it was now. Probably about 8 weeks
August.
ago. August, fuck me. So about 6 weeks ago, seven. Well, no, yeah, 6 weeks ago, something like that. And obviously a big event in the jiu-jitsu sphere, the grappling sphere. And we've been meaning to do this for a while. We've just not been able to sort of pen a time down and get it sorted. And we're going to talk about the perfect performance. We thought that would be a really good way to tie it in to CGI because of some of the performances on there and some of the standout things. I think one of the things that we both want to make really clear on the preface of this, obviously working with athletes and being fan of their various different sports. Like I watch too much sport that it probably takes more of my time away than is actually necessary. But we should preface this with when anything we say within this is not meant in the form of criticism. This is something that I really struggle with because when you deal with athletes and you deal with people day to day, you see the ins and outs of success and failure, and you develop a certain level of empathy towards individuals. And it, I'm a big believer of the man in the arena or the woman in the arena, in terms of
Person in the arena.
the person in the arena. In that they're the ones out there going and doing it, and it's not a nice thing to come across critically. I think it's something that I struggle with is criticizing people. Like even when I go and watch fucking Everton because we're shit, and I'm like in the moment I'm just like sat next to my mate and I'm like he's fucking terrible. Like, and then I sort of have a moment in my head and I go. He's still a person though. I feel quite bad
Yeah.
about calling him terrible, but like
And
it's
he's
so we should
still
pre
still better
he's
than
still
either of
shit.
us would ever
Yeah,
be.
yeah. He's still better than either of us ever would be. So like, and
Ever
making
will
more
be.
money and be more successful than any of us ever will be. So like, it's criticism. Criticism isn't the word, but we're analysing. I think as
It's
coaches,
it's
our job
feedback.
is feedback, isn't it? And our job is like when I was watching the event, I always watch things with two heads. So I've got the individual who is a fan of grappling, a fan of jiu-jitsu, but I've got the coaching head as well who's watching it and going, oh, that's interesting. That's probably not that great. And like, it helps us develop as coaches as well. So, yeah, we wanted to preface that with this episode
Yeah.
before we get into it.
And
But
just off air, what Andrew actually said was he's better than all of them, and he couldn't run that competition. He'd be a
yeah,
millionaire if he tried.
fucking hell, yeah. Oh, if only I didn't have a back injury.
What if we
Oh,
get? Oh, guys,
oh, no,
I could
I've
never
just
prove
injured.
this. Yeah.
Sorry, you'll just have to take my word for it. Yeah,
I
um,
promise I would have been great. You visualized yourself
yeah,
doing
I've
it.
been in that
Yeah.
position. I mean, the ironic thing is, I've rolled with one or two of the people who were on the show, and I definitely couldn't have won it.
Yeah,
But
thinking about it, I rolled with one and they gently, very gently, made me feel like I'd never done jiu-jitsu in my
yeah,
entire
yeah,
life.
yeah. So
It was like when you're a kid and you wrestle with your dad. You're like,
yeah, yeah.
right.
So yeah. But anyway, so we wanted to preface that. So what did you think, Dave? What were your thoughts? I know you've not watched all of it, but like, what were your thoughts?
Well, for one, so from an entertainment perspective, I thought it was magnificent. I thought it was everything that is missing in jiu-jitsu to try and push it over the top. Um, the marketing was fantastic. It wasn't dry. They weren't just leaning on this because they couldn't. It wasn't, this is the legacy, this is the Olympics, as say ADCC does. But it also meant that they had to do some silly stuff, and I thought it struck a really nice balance between, as you and I were talking about, it being over the top and ridiculous and just pulling people in who'd never watched anything before, and also showcasing some of the best jiu-jitsu on the planet. And
Yeah,
I heard someone, I can't remember who it was now, they were saying they were watching both events with a friend who'd never watched any jiu-jitsu before, and they asked if ADCC and CJI were different sports.
Oh,
because
really?
they just felt so different from start to
Different.
finish. And I
It
mean,
is really.
we'll come to some of that because it's to do with like the way the arena's designed and the rule set being a bit more transparent and a bit more not transparent necessarily, but a bit clearer on how judges make their judgments when the rules are unclear.
Yeah.
That meant they look so different, but
Yeah, and it's we spoke about this off air before we went live, didn't we? But like my perspective is I'm quite conflicted because I am a fan of sports. I like sports. I'm very much a purist around sport. I like things being done properly. I like things taken seriously. And CJI was like none of that from an event perspective.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if you've seen it, but like obviously they do like loads of behind the scenes stuff. And there's Craig Jones is in his changing room and quite clearly leans off camera and just does a bump of something. Like my head's sort of like so conflicted because I'm like, that's fucking hilarious. But at the same time, I'm also like, it's probably not the best we're doing that at the same. Like we're trying to get people to take this shit seriously, but again, it's like you said, look, hugely entertaining. Like the stripping off at the side of the
the booing from the crowd when he's got trousers on.
the booing like it's like a serious actor going and doing Snow White in a pantomime at Christmas. Like it's a bit like there's something about it which conflicts me. But obviously it was. I agree. The sentiment in terms of its entertainment value was off the charts. Really, like
he also did that nicely because he took that on as his mantle. It was very much like I'm going to do the silly shit. Here are the athletes who are going to win stuff.
It's really interesting. But obviously, even with the silliness, there was some really, like you said, unbelievable performances which highlighted the professionality and the quality of the individuals that are competing.
Can we, before we jump into all of that, I would just like to talk about Gabby Garcia's heel hook defense, which I think is the absolute best defense on the planet, which is Craig is my friend. He's not going to break my fucking leg.
Yeah. He's just going to. We all know it's a bit of a joke. He
was like, I can't do this. That was one of my favourite moments just for that.
It was a spectacle, to put it to the least. And obviously, like, again, I know it was all a fucking joke, but like it is good for like the highlighting the women in the sport and that like recognition to somebody who, I mean, you can have debates about Gabby Garcia and her approach to grappling and whether she's actually any good at it, but like it was a nice thing to see that she got that recognition at the end of the match and like I think that
she's just today gone into the Guinness World Book of Records, and they were listing off like there are a load of things we could give her a record for. I know that I have some friends who've worked there, but I know that they've changed their approach is now to just give out as many fucking records as possible.
Yeah, just give the recognition.
They highlighted some of the things that she had done, and it's like the first female jiu-jitsu instructor to a shake. She's like the first female, I think female coach, definitely female grappling coach on The Ultimate Fighter. Like there's just a whole list of stuff that she that hadn't been offered to women before. Like you said, whether you agree with how she grapples or the circumstances that mean she's got that name, it's not like she hasn't created opportunities.
No, 100%. Like
it's just me and fuck you guys. Like,
sometimes
greatest grapplers of all time.
Sometimes someone extreme. Sometimes someone has to do something extreme in order to break down the doors, don't they? And again, whether you agree with the morality of some of the decisions relative to drug use or whatever it is, like you can't question the fact that it took someone with the bravery to be able to just like take it on the fucking chin and just be like, I'm just going to go and do it anyway. And obviously, so she got the recognition she deserved. And obviously it was done in a light-hearted. It also showed her funny side as well with all the like scripting with the kiss at the weigh-ins and shit like that. Like it was a show, wasn't it? And they made it a show, but so obviously like all the fun shit aside, I like to think I take watching jiu-jitsu quite seriously and like to try and watch all of the things that I can. And there was some real performances that really stood out. Obviously, we've talked a bit about this off air, but like obviously the Tackett Rutulo match was the big one, which we'll talk a little bit more in depth. That's going to be sort of the general topic of conversation for the episode. But yeah, obviously, like I was really impressed with Jason Nolf. We've already spoken about this, but against Ty, I thought like when you were watching him, I was so impressed with how he integrated freestyle or folk style into a submission grappling event, especially against arguably the number one guy that probably should have been the number one seed in that. I mean, I know Cade won ADCC and went on to win the event, but even Cade sort of says my brother's better than me. Was really impressive.
Yeah.
Like the level of understanding and adjustment based off, like obviously we talk about skill a lot on this podcast, but like he adapted so well. He didn't show, obviously when you get people who specialize in certain events, when they transition, it doesn't always work quite the same, does it? Like it's why really, really decorated freestyle wrestlers don't do that well in MMA, because they're so specialized in what they do. It doesn't always translate. And it was little things from the way he'd adjusted his stance and his posture, and sort of navigated certain attacks, setting up takedowns from certain attacks, to integrate that.
Sorry, to give credit where credit's due, I think it's also why you don't see as many judoka doing very well in submission grappling. And I think it's one of the things that, like, Owen Livesey is absolutely phenomenal for. Like, that is a person who's brought in a whole aspect of judo to the sport that just wasn't there before. Like, how many people now, this is going to sound stupid, but how many people now know what a foot sweep is who before didn't have a fucking clue?
Yeah.
Like, it's that aspect that sometimes gets lost, because you look at the bigger picture and go, oh, well, they lost. And it's like, but give them a couple of years, right training environment, and it'll be a very different story. And I think that was quite something we discussed, was it will be very, very interesting to see some of these wrestlers who go, there's another $1 million on the line. I think I'll go and train jiu-jitsu then. I don't think it's going to be that long, because you have a sort of, well, look at Nick Rodriguez. You've got a kind of perfect storm of guys who've worked in actual, they're not professional because wrestling is amateur, but professional settings. Because if you're wrestling at college level in America at a decent school, that is almost exactly the same kind of setup as a professional sport. It's not,
but it's interesting, isn't it? This leads quite into the topic of conversation for the episode. Is like, again, this idea of specialization, and we often talk about constraint and how constraint is one of the things that influences behavior. And you look at like the likes of like Nicky Rod didn't obviously wrestle at the highest level, like it was like Division 2, I think, or Division 3. So like obviously better wrestler than 99% of the population, but not quite good enough to be pushing that D1 Olympic standard.
In wrestling terms.
In wrestling terms. But obviously, is that the right amount of integration and preparation that's led him to success? Because you could argue that any more level of specialization and the amount of work and effort that you have to put in, again, we talk about intention, that intention that to make an Olympic team or whatever it is that too much specialization? Is there too much organization relative to the organism, i.e. the individual, that means that when they transition, it's very difficult to break those patterns?
Yeah. Well, just to take it to the kind of stuff that we talk about, but you need to have certain things as engrams. So you will, I know we talk about variability and the ability to solve the problem from a variety of different ways, and that the best people can get the same outcome that they want through a variety of different positions. But if you have a rule set that pushes you being in a very specific, so for example, the certain height that you need to be wrestling at, if you've competed at the Olympics and are that elite, there's always going to be a tension between how trainable you are, how good you are at picking stuff up, which will be off the fucking charts. Like, there will be people who you or I could show an Olympic weightlift to once. I mean, probably someone else who's better at Olympic weightlifting. They'll immediately do it. Like, it's where bad coaches hide sometimes in is working with elite athletes, because
it's
it's
easy.
easy to do okay. It's very hard to be very, very good at, but to look better than you are, it's easy because they do it. That's why they're an athlete and you and I are not.
Yeah, and again, you could look at like the importance. Again, we talk about like affordance in terms of like how do we perceive a credible action that we can put into place, and something with specialization as well is that again, I don't know the technicalities of this. I'm making a general assumption based on a conversation, but
yeah.
Is there an argument for being somebody being so specialised that their affordance for an action is so ingrained within a task that it's very difficult for them to break out of that action?
Yeah.
Whereas like somebody who's not quite as good but is still at a good level, still has that ability to be like can change their perspective of an action. That you could make that argument.
I'd argue that that's 100% the case. Look at I can't think of his name now. Dwayne Chambers.
Yeah.
He said that was one of the things that he found incredibly difficult with when he went to was it rugby league he played?
Yeah, he went and played for Castleford League.
Yeah. And he said that was the problem, was he's fucking rapid, but he's like, I can't change direction.
Yeah.
I don't run in angles.
Yeah.
I run in a straight line as fast as I fucking can.
Yeah.
And then he said tackling and then actually taking contact. Again, skills that he'd not developed. And yeah, I completely agree with you that you can specialize to the point where it's going to be to a detriment because you're so used to solving a problem in a specific way.
In a specific way.
I used the example of height. That if you are an elite wrestler, there's going to be that tension between can you adjust the height, or are you just so used to having been at that height for that many years that you just cannot? It fucks everything else up.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel right.
Yeah, because it changes the flow, doesn't it? It changes how you actually solve problems, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's you're used to operating in a certain way, and you have to adjust that completely, and it's an absolute minefield, and
right.
Yeah, it's just interesting.
Let's get to what I think both of us found was probably the bit that everyone's been missing, because there's been quite a lot of criticism around not criticism, everyone enjoyed it, but I think there are a few people saying some of the matches they didn't agree with the scoring and didn't think certain people had won.
Yeah,
I personally would argue that those people didn't read the fucking rules.
Probably.
We also have a sneaking suspicion that some of the athletes may not have read the fucking rules, or
Probably
read them but didn't really understand them, because the difference here was that this was 3 5-minute rounds with 1 minute rest in between. So very much kind of MMA rules or time constraints in that perspective. But also they were using the must scoring system. So that's the one that gets used in boxing, MMA. It's not a perfect system by any means. There are a lot of complaints around it, but it's not terrible either.
No.
It does mean that if you pay attention to the fact that that scoring system is in place, you could, if you say watched MMA, pay attention to the approach some people will take to those.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I think people missed out on was in that scoring rule set, one of the very well-known things is you can steal a fucking round by doing something towards the end of the round, because the judges are only human and they can't keep the whole match in their head for the full 5 minutes. So there is a level of tactics here that a few people seem to adopt and others didn't. Finish a round strong, for example. If you finish every round strong, you are more likely to win.
Yeah.
No matter what happened in the first 2 minutes, if in the last 2 minutes, or even ideally the last 30 to 60 seconds, you do something dramatic enough, especially because this is a new rule set in terms of scoring for people. Like, at least in MMA, there's been a history of scoring with that, so you will get judges who are more experienced alongside judges who are less experienced. But for everyone in jiu-jitsu, this is new, so they're going to fall into the traps that inexperienced MMA judges do, for example. So there's that. There's the fact that, like you and I discussed, was it Levi Jones-Leary, Cade Ruotolo?
Yeah.
You felt that actually from his back, Levi was doing a bit more than Cade actually was.
Yeah.
The downside to that is that this rule set doesn't afford for that.
No.
This rule set says and there's three things that they judge it on, and I've written them down. That's why I'm looking down here at my notes. People who are initiating. So if you're actually actively trying to make stuff happen, now you could argue that maybe Levi, by what you were saying, of he's trying to advance the position, he's trying to create opportunities. He's finding it difficult because it's hard from the bottom against someone.
Yeah, very tough.
Good. You could argue he's initiating, but then equally you've got the other judgment call was like dynamic. What was it? I can't remember. It was like dynamism. Sorry, was what they said, and close subs. So anytime you almost got a sub, that put you in the judge's favor. And dynamism was like you're actually trying to do things that are exciting.
Yeah.
And dynamism isn't always the most sensible jiu-jitsu.
No.
But if that's what they're looking for, that's what you fucking do.
Yeah, of course. And I think it's an important, like, sorry, mate, I was just gonna caveat that with, like, one of the things that I think that's worth pointing out is, obviously, again, like, this Rutulo Takic match has been, I've seen people call it, like, the greatest jiu-jitsu match of all time, like, the best thing they've ever seen, and there's arguments for that. There was a few. Obviously, we're not here to pick bones in that. There is obviously the Tonen Polaris match, which is iconic. Obviously, there's like a couple of like Marcelo Garcia matches, things like that are like these standout performances that Lachlan, ADCC. Like there is, and I think it's important to note that when we often talk about performance in this context of like, well, how do we get the best performance? How can we perform at the best of our ability? And obviously our job is, for the most part, getting an individual to perform as best as they possibly can. Yeah. And I think it's really worth pointing out in jiu-jitsu is that a performance like that on that scale of that historic grandeur, they're once in a blue moon, but they're also an amalgamation of things that are very much not in the control of an individual. Yeah. Like, obviously, the skill factor is massive, and you need two individuals who are willing to go to a young, not carrying major injuries, that are confident, that can literally just be like, I'm just going to fucking go here for 15 minutes. Yeah. And if it kills me, it kills me. Like, we talk about affordance in terms of skill, but having the affordance to go, you know what, I can do this for 15 minutes and I can have a pop and not have a single fear, and not have a single style makes matches.
Sorry, in terms of style, in terms of their psychological profile is the wrong phrase for it, but is that the type of game they like to do? Yes.
Yeah, like there's... Yeah. No, sorry. I was just going to say, like, and you take those factors, and then you add in the rule set. You add in the history of the event. It's the excitement, the hype about the event. You add in the money, because money is a fucking big driver of performance.
Also,
like
you add in their history, the fact that
their history, never met in competition. Oh yeah, since a very young age. Like, and you've got this perfect matchup of two young grapplers who have been doing this. They probably grapple better than they walk at this point, because we're starting to see that emergence of these kids that have been doing it since they were kids. Do you know what I mean? Like, grappling is as natural to them as breathing is. Like, their bodies are so adapted to do this thing exceptionally well that it leads to, it's like it's almost like when they talk about, I mean, my understanding of astrophysics is very, very, very limited. But you know, when they talk about, you hear people talk about the conditions for the Big Bang, in that they had to have these perfect conditions and these atoms or whatever collided and created this massive thing that led to the growth and birth of organisms and whatever it is. Again, I'm doing a shite job of that. Apologies, it's not my strong foot. But like, we've
stepped quickly away from the big.
Yeah, we talked into let's move away from something we do know about to talk about something we know nothing about. But that the example I'm trying to make is that it was like this. It's almost that in it. It's that, like, you get these two things that are just going about the world in space, and they just collide and they create this like wonderful thing that we all get to experience and to watch. And there's a couple things that we can pick out about that in terms of like, again, we'll talk about preparation versus like skill and all that different sort of stuff. But like, it was just a really cool thing to see. And yeah, I've rambled a bit there.
But it was wild. Like,
Yeah.
it was back and forth for 15 minutes, and that doesn't happen in jiu-jitsu,
No.
especially not in the old time limit rules, like all that.
Yeah,
shit.
yeah, yeah.
This was exciting. It was fun to watch. It made sense. Like, fundamentally, one of the biggest problems for jiu-jitsu making it as a mainstream sport is that there isn't one set of fucking rules. And I think a nice example that could be followed is skateboarding, in that there is a rule set. It's accepted that is the rule set if you want to go and compete at the Olympics or you want to compete in certain competitions. But the rest of the sport still exists outside of that. So you can.
And the parks change.
Yeah,
that's there's no standard, is there? So it's like you get that standardization of a rule set, but the ability to be creative and employ that variability, and the athletes are then allowed to go and express themselves. Is still there, isn't it?
But also the roots of the sport haven't gone, because you can still street skate.
Yeah.
And you can still have as much respect being a really, really fucking good street skater as you could
Yeah.
being a gold medalist. Arguably, probably more, because you're more
Yeah.
in the sport itself. But that's a nice way of seeing it. And I think we've seen it a few times. Like, I remember when EBI first arrived and we're like, fuck, this is the solution. The problem with any rule set is that people will work out how to game it and how to better take advantage.
That's the really interesting thing. Like, that was the thing that I thought, especially not so much in the over 80 kilo, because Nicky Rod was obviously phenomenal, but the under 80, I thought it was really interesting to me. Like, when I watched that final and everyone's going, oh, it was boring and booing, it's like, have you not watched sport before? Do you not watch sport? How many finals do you watch? Like, where everything's on the line. There's $1 million on the line.
Yeah.
Like, there aren't, like, you could watch again, football, watch Champions League finals. They're usually pretty shit. They're not exciting games because this is all or nothing. This is the glory. It's very rare that in a final situation, it's unbelievable. It's just like,
if I'm honest, you're describing all football for me right now.
Yeah, but like, all right. But like
No, but seriously, the point that I mean is, people love watching football, and yet if you step back for a moment and look at it, the majority of the time it is 43 minutes of both halves of the same shit repeated again and again and again and again, because you're trying to go through attacking and defensive cycles to find something. And then the final 2 minutes, maybe someone fucking scores, and that's it.
Yeah.
Like, and that was weird for me coming from rugby, where it's like, it can be like that, but it's, for whatever reasons, the scoring system, whatever, tends to be a little bit higher, and there's a little bit more back and forth than can exist at that top level.
Yeah.
But it's about, it makes me laugh that people think everything should be entertaining all the time. I'm like,
it's just not. Like, it's not sport.
Six Nations rugby. Oh,
they
won 5-0. You're like, fuck hell, I've just wasted 80 minutes of my life watching this.
I've been to fight. Like, again, a really good example of this is like, again, because I watch a lot of sport, me, but like rugby. So I've been to like grand finals and watched Wigan, and Wigan it's shit. Because like with me and one of them, we went to the Challenge Cup final this year at Wembley, and it was awful because Wigan was so much better than the other team. Like, it was crap. It was like, it weren't even a contest. Like, you were bored at a final, just going, well, they're a bit shit. They've won this after about 60 minutes, and like, it's sport. That's what makes it good. Like, I can't comprehend this like all or nothing. Again, people are like, why are they not standing up? It's like, it's submission grappling, you fucking idiots. Like, what do you expect is going to happen? It's not a wrestling match. Go and watch freestyle. Don't watch submission grappling. Like, it's not always going to be, and it doesn't help that we just had that like unbelievable performance from Tackett and Rotulos. But like, what do you expect is going to happen? How many like?
I don't know what happened to my camera there.
No, you're right. How many? It's submission grappling. The aim is to go and get a submission. It's not point scoring grappling. And don't get me wrong, like, I'm not like slagging off the stand up side of it, because obviously that was a massive thing that made it entertaining. But in terms of like achieving the objective, you're actually nowhere near it. Do you know what I mean? Like the Tackett Rutulo match was incredible, but there was a couple of opportunities. There was the one where he went for the duck under, and Tackett did an unbelievable job of sort of countering it, and it looked like he had him.
Got the rear naked choke in, didn't he?
Yeah. So like,
was it Cade had the Darce attempt?
Yeah, they had the Darce attempt, but like they weren't really that close to being finished. So it's and obviously it creates that excitement and the action, but in terms of achieving the objective, it's not actually. It wasn't really relative, if that makes sense. Like, it's such a weird thing in jiu-jitsu where the objective doesn't necessarily match the output.
Yeah,
like and I think that was particularly shown in the heavyweight divisions, because there was a lot more tactical approaches to the game being played in there. The lightweights were a bit just like, fuck it, let's have a go. Whereas the heavyweights were a bit more tactical in their approaches.
So this kind of leads back to where we were talking about the rule set, and I think what's quite interesting is part of the reason why, for once, you see the heavyweights be more tactical than a lot of the lighter guys is this rule set favors people with very high outputs and very capable of recovering between those high outputs. So something that I didn't see this, but that you said Andrew Tackett was doing between matches, and something I'd seen Nick Rodriguez do between matches is, we're both as strength coaches just jizzing our pants over this, but they both focused on breathing, because what was going to differentiate, if you had to do, like, I imagine there were heavyweights who looked at that and went, oh, $1 million, yeah, fucking wicked. And then they went, oh shit, if I don't sub anyone, I could be in for half an hour's worth of the hardest jiu-jitsu I've ever done.
Yeah.
And then at least half an hour. No, sorry, you could do 50 minutes of the hardest jiu-jitsu you've ever done on the second day. And then the best bit being, I don't know if you saw, if you didn't win in 25 minutes, all that would happen in the final is they would continue to spam overtime rounds until someone won.
Yeah.
And that's a living hell for a heavyweight.
So
I can see why straight away they're like, I need to
about this. It was blatant, mate. It was blatant. Again, this is where the criticism comes in. It was blatantly obvious to me, watching it, who had prepared and who hadn't.
Yeah.
There was more heavyweights that hadn't prepared than there were lightweights. The lightweights looked on it. But for me, like, I think the evolution of this tournament will become, you cannot, when that kind of money is on the line, you cannot afford to just do the old, I'll just do jiu-jitsu and hope for the best. It became guys that were just actively looking for submissions, they went out early doors. If you were playing the game of just like, I'm just going to try and tap him, those guys went, because they weren't tactically aware enough. They weren't prepared. Like you said, the Tackett, when I seen him, like, it sounds ludicrous, but like Dave said, we're sad bastards because it's our job. But it like panned to his face, and you could see him. He was like in a process. It was like it had been worked out that in between rounds he was going to go through this routine. It was like he was taking like double breaths. So he was going like, and then exhaling, like getting all the air out. Now, again, there's some research out there on double, triple breaths on the parasympathetic response for those sad bastards that are listening. But again,
Cal Dietz.
Cheers, Cal Dietz. A bit of Andrew Huber-nonce as well.
I've never heard that nickname.
But like, that shit aside, to me, what was impressive was like, oh, he's actually thought about what he's going to do in between rounds here.
Yeah.
That's been practiced. It's been rehearsed. They're resetting each round. And I was like, he's ready to go here. He's actually fucking on it. He wants to win this shit. He's not just gone, oh, there's $1 million. Oh, I'll just enter. Yeah. Like, it was like, oh no, he actually wants to win.
But I think for both of us to be completely clear here, I don't think there's anything wrong with taking that approach of, $10,001. That's
no.
If you consider that for some guys, they were looking at one of the hardest days of one of the hardest weekends of jiu-jitsu in their life by doing that at ADCC.
Yeah.
And now you could just kind of phone it in and get 10,001 and just go out in the first round.
Oh yeah, 10 grand for a minimum of 15 minutes work is pretty solid, isn't it?
Yeah, or just get subbed.
Or just get subs. You just go home and spend it. Like,
yeah, exactly. And I think there's something to be said for that. I don't think there's anything wrong necessarily that some people came in and just went, "Fuck it, it's an easy payday," and they've asked me. Now, if you're wanting to win it, it's a very different like kettle of fish. I don't understand the people who were hoping they would win that competition who didn't fucking prepare for that competition. Like,
yeah,
if you didn't prepare to have a wall, I don't understand how you thought you were going to win.
It's difficult, mate. Like, I'm a bit like, again, you won't know this because it's a football reference, but I'm a bit Roy Keane about shit, me. Like, there's a block in yeah. There's a block in my brain that's like, why would you not? Do you know what I mean? Like,
I know.
There's a part of me that's just like, what's the point? And I think that it's an issue that we see across the board in jiu-jitsu is in terms of the standards across the board. And there are some people who do this exceptionally well, and then there are others who are fucking terrible. And like I thought there was. I'm going off on one here. I thought there was a real clear skill deficit with a lot of them, like especially for guys competing at that level. Again, they'd all kick the fucking shit out of me. But watching it from a coaching perspective, if I was looking at like, if it was one of my guys that were doing that, obviously none of my guys are at that level. But if I was watching the guys at my level, I'd be like, well, that's shit. Like real basic stuff, like fucking framing. Do you know what I mean? Like basic things that you're supposed to learn as a fucking blue belt. Like,
but this is also the problem I think we have with the fact that this sport is as Craig Jones said in a podcast today, or that I listened to today, barely professional. Like it's barely a sport.
Yeah, it's barely a sport.
But I think it's something that the Australians do very well because they can compete in very, very high level sports in whatever, and they don't take those. They take them just seriously enough. And then you can come from a sport like that and you then go and do jiu-jitsu and go, oh, this isn't a sport. No one's treating this like a sport. It's changed in the training lifespan of you and me, that's significantly changed.
Oh yeah.
But
this is an interesting, I've got an actual theory. I've got some science for this episode rather than just talking bollocks. So obviously we talk about like, there's a really interesting concept, and I'm not actually sure if it fits into this, but I'll try and make it work. I could be talking shite. So there's an idea in ecology, and not ecology as in ecological dynamics, but in ecology and like evolution and stuff like that. It's like this idea of a niche and how environmental factors create a niche relative to a subset of species within that environment. Yeah. And it's a really interesting thing because when you think about it logically, like you just mentioned in terms of the Australians, we can start to make cultural references towards like personality types, like you said, and how you then approach events. And it doesn't make anything logical, but it's something worth thinking about for guys that run gyms, because the environment and your culture within an environment, again, that paper that you sent me the other day that was really good, I was reading it recently about the redefining periodization. Yeah. One of the concepts that was mentioned in that is how culture and belief systems and things create adaptation relative to performance, because it's how we perceive the stressor. And there's like allostatic load and all that fucking bollocks. But like, it's a really interesting thing, and how we can, again, it makes no difference to people trying to get better, but it actually is worth observing is that cultural differences impact preparation for and how they going about tasks. So like you said, Australians, generally speaking, very laid back, tend to make jokes about everything, and that's wonderful for them. But like the British, we might
also work really fucking hard.
But work really hard. Yeah, because that typically is what their culture creates, that niche for them to operate in. British, we might have to be a bit more stoic. We might have to be a bit more stiff upper lip. Do you know what I mean? Like a bit more serious about it, because for whatever reason, if we're too relaxed, it's not productive enough. And obviously, I'm making large assumptions about subsections of people
how
here.
Close is Andrew getting to sounding xenophobic?
But that's what I mean. Like, it's interesting to like observe when you look at like how different groups of people operate based on cultural differences or whatever it is. I think it's I'm going way off the mark here, but like it's it's something that interests me.
Americans, a gun and McDonald's.
Yeah, but like
They'll train
it's
harder than anyone.
yeah, but they like taking things seriously, and I think that's something about
They've got a sense of humour.
The Americans is they take things very seriously and they apply themselves to the task. And it's interesting when you look at like different outcomes and how that potentially could impact performance. Like you said, like you've got the Americans that are in jiu-jitsu representing a higher stage. You've got a couple of Australians in the mix, like you said, a bit more relaxed, a bit more chilled out, but can perform at that level. Like, it's interesting. I don't know. It makes no difference to the point, really, but it's just something that I thought we'd touch on.
I think the other aspect of that, though, is yes, the broader culture is important, but I would say that the training room culture is even more important.
Yeah.
Because within that, you're going to have gyms that have very different approaches. You know, B Team is a very different culture to New Wave.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
But you're also going to have a different... it doesn't mean that it's less professional, and I think that's the problem. Is there's this assumption that there is one way, and it's been a fucking double R bastard, and you just go really hard, and fuck you, and I'll kill all my enemies. All this fucking pseudo masculine bollocks.
Yeah, the bollocks. It doesn't do anything.
May not. For some people, it'll work, but for as many people as it'll work, it won't work. And what's really interesting about B Team is they have a variety of different people who prepare in different ways. Like we talked about before, Craig Jones and Nick Rodriguez are opposite ends of the scale. Nick wants everything to be exactly the same so that he feels comfortable in difficult situations because he can fall back on the thing that he's trained again and again and again. Craig just pretends it's not happening until he gets in there.
Yeah, and you saw that. You actually saw that on the day, didn't you? You saw like Nick was like there was nothing until it finished. It was like it was all business, wasn't it? It was just like, I'm here to fucking kill you. Do you know what I mean? And then it obviously finished, and then he obviously showed all the emotion. But
because there's $1 million on the line, and he'd just become a dad, I think. Yeah,
just had a kid, I think. Yeah,
there's no time to fuck around there.
No.
Taken time away from some of the most important, or some of the most valuable points of being a dad. Not valuable, opportunities he'll never get back. So he had to win that $1 million because otherwise he's taken time away from his kid for nothing.
And again, you're looking at you could break it down more towards like the tactical approach, like you said, it was like, I'm going to get in and get out as fast as I can.
Yeah.
I'm not going to fuck around doing 15 minutes because I've got to do 4 or 5 of these rounds. I'm not going to do 15 minutes every time. I'm going to do 3 minutes, then I'm going to do 2 minutes. And like, I don't think there is an answer to this question, really. I think it's very individual, isn't it? But we can make good assumptions that we can take into the training room, like creating a process, having a strategy. Like it's. I think what's also worth pointing out to a lot of people is the outcomes of a performance are not really measured in the 8-week preparation or whatever it is, 12 weeks, 8 weeks, 6 weeks. I think the outcomes of like the Tackett Rutulo match was not an amalgamation of 12 weeks of preparation for the event. It was the amalgamation of 15 years of getting after it, day after day after day. And then you created this perfect environmental conditions of the rule set, the hype around the event, the financial incentive, the whatever it is, sponsorship incentive, the way that event could change their life. And you take those two immovable objects and smash them together, and it creates this spectacle, doesn't it?
Yeah. But so just to kind of pull us back a little bit to talking about where people were more or less successful based on whether they'd paid attention to the rules or not.
Fucking hell, I dig that. My fault. Apologies.
No, right. What we have is a rule set that very much favors takedowns.
Yeah.
Because one, why wouldn't you? Like,
yeah.
Let's be realistic here. Jiu-jitsu guys suck at takedowns.
It's where
sorry, that's not fair at all. Like Owen Livesey does not suck at takedowns, and neither does Nick Rodriguez. But the vast majority of people in jiu-jitsu are good enough at takedowns.
Yeah.
Now, as we saw, Jason Nolf can turn up and go, "Oh, this bit of the game, this is mine. You're not looking." And I think the way in which that can show you as either controlling the pace or dominant pace or doing something dynamic is huge. In the same way that in MMA, you can steal around with a well-timed takedown at the end. And
a takedown is as valuable as a big shot in MMA, isn't it?
Exactly. And I think as well, you're seeing that sub attempts are great, but if all you're seeking is that sub to finish, you're going to struggle because you don't have a lot of options for how to win that match.
Yeah.
And it's going to be different at the lighter weight class and the heavier weight class as well, because the heavier guys cannot do the recoverability that the lighter guys can.
Yeah.
Like,
And I think
if you've done a Cade and Tackett match in the heavyweight, you're done. You're going out the next round.
Oh yeah, you've got a defib. You've got a defib coming out, haven't you?
yeah. And I think that's also important. Is you're going to see a different style of jiu-jitsu in the different weight categories.
And I think
you do at stuff
one
like
of
80cc.
one of the interesting things that you just pointed out regarding the wrestling as well is I think you saw a real, again, this idea of like skill deficit was there was guys that I think, I mean, fundamentally the guys that went on to win it were the guys that broadcast efficiency and effectiveness across the board.
Yeah.
So like there wasn't really, even though like you could argue Nicky Rod is a better top player than he is a bottom player, and you could argue that similar for like Cade, their effectiveness relative to the rule set was across the board. So it created, and again, more so in the lighter divisions than it was in the heavier division, but the likes of Cade, the likes of the Tackets, if they lost a position, they are confident enough across the board to bring it back. So that meant that, like, I know Ty obviously got injured and couldn't continue, but Ty could stand toe-to-toe with Jason Nolf, who is obviously far superior a wrestler, because it's that understanding of, well, if he takes me down, I'm better off my back than he is on top anyway. So it's like there was no real weak points for him. And the ability to be adaptable and to change was significant. I think that was probably a big thing in the final for Levi, was that Cade is better across the board.
Yeah.
And it meant that Levi was so pinned into being on his back. Yeah. I mean, obviously Levi's probably got one of the best guards in the world, so he'd probably favour that position anyway. But in terms of being adaptable and interchangeable, the favour was always going to be for Cade, because it didn't matter where the game was being played. Yeah. There was only really one way that Levi was going to win, whereas Cade could have won from off his back, on his feet, or passing.
And I think that's one of the important takeaways from this, is that top game carries a huge number of advantages that bottom doesn't. The advantage of bottom is you're closer to a sub if you can play it well. The downside is that if the top player is good, they get to rest and make your life miserable, and you're fucking knackered, and they're not. And then they can do some dynamic shit, or throw you when you try and wrestle up, or whatever. And so as a result, there's a real risk that you pen yourself into not having very many options compared to someone who's a bit more of like a Swiss Army knife. They can do a little bit of everything. Are they the best at any of them? Not necessarily. I mean, this isn't fair either. We're talking about some of the best grapplers.
Yeah, the best grapplers on the world.
But even within that, there are people who are there because one thing stands out more than the rest, and then there are others who are just fucking good at everything.
Good across the board. Like, you look at, like, I mean, obviously I know he wasn't there, but like Mika Galvao was a really good example, because he can just do everything.
Exactly.
There is nothing that that lad can't. And you watch it again. I posted a highlight of it again. We're off the CJI topic, but like, I posted a highlight of it, and there was a short clip on it, and within 5 seconds, he literally went through the game of grappling. It was mental. He went from like a leg attack to a sweep to a pass to a back attack, like in the snap of the fingers. Yeah. And I think that really showed, because, again, when we talk about skill and we talk about this affordance in the context of like intention affects attention, is when you've got this broad spectrum of ability across the board, everything's affordable.
Yeah.
Whereas if
you've literally got more options to win.
Yeah. Whereas if you're penned into certain skill set, whether it is like guard players, obviously in no-gi, you've got two options in no-gi nowadays with guard. You either attack a leg or you try and stand back up. Realistically, at that top level, sweeping and playing guard in the context of what most of us think about playing guard pretty much doesn't exist, because you've got to get to the thing that's going to work in it. Like, trying to play, like, I mean, the gi is different because the gi affords more guarded situations, but it's a leg lock or get back up in it, basically. And it's just having that capability of like, oh, I don't have to stay on the bottom. because I know that I can get up and pass, or I can get up and I can stand back up and not be worried about getting taken down again.
Yeah.
It's and it's a difficult thing to think because like it's easier said than done, isn't it? Like you said, it's all well and good us two sitting here going, be good at everything. That's what fucking everyone's trying to do.
But it's not necessarily just be good at everything. It was also recognize where the way that this can be won. Because realistically, against the rest of the best guys in the world, what are your odds of subbing them in 5 minutes? It's not high.
No.
Like, it can be done, and people did win by subs, but especially that's why there were. You saw the way to winning for Nick Rodriguez was through subs because he had an approach that would allow him to get to those. That works with heavyweights. At the bottom level, at the smaller weights, everyone is fucking great. There is not as much of a disparity of quality. It still exists, but the gap between people can be much bigger at heavier just because there's fewer people who are there. Whereas the smaller guys, there's fucking millions of them. So the very, very best compete against each other, and there's more of them than there are equivalent very, very best. I
think an interesting one with the Nicky Rod one as well is, and we talked about like affordance in terms of being able to afford a performance. Like obviously he's a very confident, sort of mentally strong individual, but he's also got the ability to be like, I can go out and attack a submission early on because I know that even if it gets to the deep waters, I'm fit enough and prepared enough to be able to it doesn't matter to me. Whereas some of these other guys...
But I think that also leveled the playing field of the bigger guys more than it did with the smaller guys. Because
100%.
You heard like the Ruotolos, and you can see the level of output they can maintain. Cover from in between.
It's frightening.
Yeah,
frightening.
And talked about you need to, if you're very good in the room, you have to fill the gaps in your conditioning. And I did a little bit on my stories a while ago where I was like, absolutely true. There are ways in which you can do that don't mean you have to get on a bike. I think Dima did that really nicely with the B team guys. I think focusing for the first, I don't know how many weeks he actually did because they only showed it towards the start, but early on they worked cardiac output, where literally it was his instructions to them for, I think it was like 1 round a day was, and maybe it was every other day. I don't give a shit what the performance looks like.
Just go.
This is not about winning. This is just you go at 100% until the round finishes. If you're sick at the end of it, that's fine. Like, he made it very clear what the purpose of that was. He was like, we want your heart rate high and we want you to maintain it high, because
it's interesting, isn't it? Like it's one of the again, positives and negatives of, and obviously, hopefully, anyone who's listening to this knows that I'm, and both of us are very pro use the sport for what the sport can do approach. But again, obviously, from a strength conditioning and a coaching perspective, you start looking at limitations and you start picking apart performances because you're like, what could be done differently? What could I do? How could I intervene that? The interesting thing from a sport perspective is your output is relatively subjective, isn't it? So like, even though he's going, I want high output, if you feel that you're tired, start slowing down, that stimulus diminishes, doesn't it? It's really interesting. Whereas like on a bike, it's very objective. If you've got you've got 30 seconds, you've got to maintain 600 watts for 30 seconds, you've got that objectivity, hasn't you? And this is where it gets interesting from our job perspective.
The other nice part of it was that I believe that for those rounds he'd pick training partners.
Oh yeah. I'm not picking apart his system. I'm just
but what I mean is, it was a nice one where he was trying to bridge the gap between conditioning and, because you could be an air bike hero. It doesn't. Oh
yeah. Oh mate, yeah. I don't, mate. Fucking hell, my thing is bridging the gap. Do you know what I mean? That's what I'm all about it. Like, that's all my work is based around, is getting people to actually effectively do the fucking. It's what this is here for, isn't it? It's like, we're trying to get people to be better at the sport. I was just simply making the point of, like, when you're obviously like, if I was reviewing from a coaching perspective. If I was reviewing from a coach perspective, like, you're watching it, like if I was Dima, for example, and you're going, right, well, what were the good things about that? What were the bad things about that? You start going, well, maybe they didn't get out of it what I wanted them to get out of it, because if you've got someone who's inherently lazy and will always find a way to cut the corners, someone like Nicky Rod, obviously I don't know him, but from what I gather, if you told him to go to the death for 5 minutes, he's probably
he
going to
will.
go to the death.
He was
Whereas
arrested. Of course he will.
there's going to be people in that room who'll do a minute hard and then they'll just coast for 4 minutes of the rest of the round. So it's like, it's an interesting thing. I think it's a really interesting. It's a different debate for another day. But
the potential there is that you try and make sure that you pick a partner who'll keep them honest.
Yeah.
Someone who, if they do try and coast, will eat them alive.
Yeah, and this is that cultural thing again, isn't it? We're talking about culture again, setting a culture in a room, and sometimes that. I mean, maybe you could have again. You can't. I'm not saying you can make this. I'm just using this as an example. You could say that like the culture in B team is very relaxed, so it's going to take a bit of time to get that. When it's professional time, we go. Do you know what I mean? Compared to New Wave, who are a bit more stoic, a bit more like stiff upper lip or whatever it is. No, I'm not saying that's the case.
You've got the advantage of it's a new coach, so in that respect, you can kind of set a tone in a way.
Yeah, of course.
Might not. And it's a new coach. They've been brought in by.
And I'm not saying that was the case at B Team. It was just making a comparative example.
But the other point that I would make is that I think a lot of people didn't do, and that you saw B Team doing because they advertised that they were doing it, was they built a wall.
Yeah,
that is a minimum. If you were training for this competition and you didn't build a fucking wall, well, either you're phenomenal. I don't know what I imagine Atos fucking built one.
Mate, if there's £1 million on the line, I'll build it in my fucking back garden.
Yeah, exactly.
It'd be my first point of call.
People who I don't think had, and
oh yeah, there'll be loads of them. Loads of them.
That's such a different thing. The first time you encounter that cannot be.
Yeah.
If £1 million is on the line and you're serious about winning that £1 million, that can't be the first time you've ever experienced.
Yeah, 100%.
That's like going, oh well, I've always played football on a 5-a-side pitch, but tomorrow I'm going to be playing on a full-size pitch. Or 12 weeks we'll be playing on a full-size pitch at Wembley for £1 million.
Yeah.
If you train for 12 weeks in a 5-a-side pitch, you're a fucking idiot.
Oh yeah.
You're literally preparing to lose.
This is the whole idea of fucking constraints. Like, this is the whole point of constraints. It changes how behaviour is impacted. And it's like, and again, this is a global issue in terms of jiu-jitsu as a whole, because there is no unified rule set. There is no unified mat space, like, whatever it is. But like, when something is that impactful, it has to be approached realistically, doesn't it? You have to approach it like it's. I don't know. It blows my head. It baffles me that like that people, and obviously like I think the Tackets straight away got one up. B Team, they got one up as well. Obviously there was a few individuals from different gyms.
Now when you want to put that up, that's different. I think you could put that up quite late in your preparation.
Yeah, probably.
As the specificity increases, that's where you want it to become more like that.
But you could also just like, I think one of the ways that I think this tournament will evolve is, we've talked about how competitors over time will start to leverage the rule set more.
Yeah.
It will be interesting to see how the wall gets used.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing that
relative to the
about when he did the karate combat matches. He said he looked at the wall and was like, "Well, I'm fucking jumping off that for shit."
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't I? What better place to play guard than there, where
you
get height that you need without having to make any effort whatsoever?
Yeah.
And I would be very interested to see how attacking sub guard players start to
use it.
Because there's a potential there that you goad someone into trying to take you down with something from the middle, like a double leg. That runs you towards the wall, and then you go, cheers, that's where I want.
Yeah.
Boom, you've popped up into, I don't know, a triangle, an arm.
Yeah.
Probably more likely a triangle, because then you're attached in a better way, because the other problem is if they just place you on there, they can use that as leverage. But if that's how Craig won loads of his fights, is it against the best in the world? No, but it shows you the potential that environment has that others don't. Anyway, I think we're going to have to call it there, mate. There's plenty more to talk about. I mean, the other one that I had was that this is a tournament where you need a big old aerobic base. If you don't
massive.
Know how to, if you haven't got an aerobic base and you don't know how to recover between rounds, and like we both said, like Andrew Tackett and I think the Real Tolos as well, and Nicky Rod, had a process in place
Yeah,
for them
yeah.
to recover.
We
With
actually
other
talked
guys who are
about.
just there blowing out of their asses.
Yeah,
Like, you've got 60 seconds. You don't
we
really
had
need
a
to like half-ass this recovery.
we had a brief conversation, didn't we, about like because when these things get announced, my brain always instantly just goes like, how would I prepare somebody for this? Like
That's what
how
I
would
did my homework last night.
but like I just think like how if I was I mean again first and foremost building the capacity to be able to hold a pace that the Tackets and the Rutulos held is a career's worth of output.
Yes.
It's not something that's built.
The weight category as well.
Yeah, weight massively. Yeah, of
With
course.
all
Like
the will in the world,
yeah,
no one at 80 plus is doing that.
no, but
Not for multiple matches.
not for multiple matches, but it's a lifetime of training that to build the physiological adaptation, again, posh terms, mitochondrial density, like just bringing your resting heart rate down 5 beats is not going to be sufficient enough. You need you need your body to be adapted. Like it's got to be ready to fucking have a go for 15 minutes. You know what I mean? And then obviously you add like extra layers of again, you could look at like again, it's technical stuff, but like your threshold stuff. So it's like how well can they buffer lactate because it's got to accumulate over 15 minutes of training, whatever. Like you can do again, if there's £1,000,000 on the line, go and get some fucking testing done. Like this could be another way that people start going is like actually bringing some sports science into the mix. How well do they buffer lactate? Obviously, I know again for those lactate isn't the thing that.
This is the other thing is that the data on jiu-jitsu is shit.
It's terrible.
It's really, really, and the data that exists because there are guys out there who quote the fucking data and this study showed it's all on gi.
Yeah. They're all Brazilians that don't fucking do anything,
and it's all gi, and so it really infuriates me when someone says this study showed that competitors should. And like, yeah, gi competitors, even the timing breakdowns and everything is all gi because it's a bigger pool and people can research it more easily. No gi is newer, so it would be very interesting to see if you've got $1 million as well. You can bring someone in if you want to.
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah.
CJI.
Yeah.
$1 million. So
like
it's interesting to see. Anyway, I'm very sorry, mate. I have.
No, it's all right. You've got responsibilities.
Yes. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, if people have got questions, if they think we're talking shit, if they want to put down what their favourite match was rather than the one that we enjoyed the most, they can put it down in the comments below if they're watching on YouTube. I think you can comment on Spotify. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you can actually. Yeah.
I don't use it. I buy CDs, so I'm not the right person to ask. Let us know. But also, if you want to find either of us, you can find us on our social media. I am getstrong.rollmore because I'm imaginative like that. And then Andrew is Brotherhood Performance. You can ask us on there. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed a slightly different route into the stuff that we like to talk about here. But yeah, just bear in mind that this sport is in its infancy and people's understandings of how stuff affects people is crap.
And I think again, like think about it. Like think about what would you do differently. I think that's a really interesting thing. Don't just obviously because they're the best in the world. Don't just go like, they're the best in the world. Think it through. Like, what would you do differently? How could you approach it differently? What would you bring into the gym? What would you bring into your training that you potentially would prepare you and help you for these things? Cool. But yeah, nice one, Dave.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Pleasure. See you in a bit.